Welcome to Cochrane Real TV. My name is Shane, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. I am going to be reading from my Bible, and I'm going to try and relate to what's happening in the world with this whole COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm going to just read a few verses from the Bible, and hopefully I could tie some things together based on my humble opinion. And this is just my opinion based on some of the things that I've been reading, studying, all that kind of stuff. And what I would really appreciate is your feedback. Feel free to comment. Tell me I'm out to lunch. Give me a thumbs up, whatever, thumbs down, whatever you feel like. So again, this is my humble opinion. So I thought I would, again, based on what's going on right now, there is a pandemic going on around the world, and it's, we call it the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. And this is what I believe is happening is I think there is a flood coming. I'm not talking about a water flood. I'm talking about a flood with regards to the whole world being either infected or influenced, whether that means something that is beyond our control, and I'll explain it in more of a detailed fashion. So when I say flood, I'm talking about total influence, total control over the world. So whether that means the whole world gets the disease, gets COVID-19, or whether that means the whole world gets vaccinated, or the whole world is influenced by governments, or the whole world is conscious of what's going on. So if you say COVID-19, chances are, no matter where you are in the world, you're going to know it's about a disease. You're going to know what COVID-19 is. So that's what I mean when I say flood, and I'll explain it a little bit more detail. We'll go to Genesis, and I'm going to talk about the original flood in Genesis chapter 6. So I got to use my reading glasses here. I'm going to be getting another pair of glasses that are bifocals, but for now, because my vision got bad in the last year or so, I don't wear these. So, all right, so let's just read from Genesis chapter 6. The people began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the beautiful women and took any they wanted as their wives. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. In those days, for some time later, giant Nephilites lived on the earth, for whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women, they gave birth to children who became heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. The Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. But Noah found favor with the Lord. So this is where I will start with, and I'm just going to jump down a little bit more. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man. This is important. The only blameless person living on earth at that time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. Noah was the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, God saw that the earth had become corrupt and was filled with violence. God observed all this corruption in the world, for everyone on earth was corrupt. So God said to Noah, I have decided to destroy all living creatures, for they have filled the earth with violence. Yes, I will wipe them all out along with the earth. All right, so then he goes into talking to Noah about building an ark. So some interesting things jump out at me, and that is that Noah was considered righteous. So when you look up the word righteous, you can take it a couple of ways. You could think of it as this man was perfect, he had no sin in his life, he was flawless, all this kind of stuff. But what I also looked up was synonyms with the word righteousness or righteous. I looked it up and I found that one of the synonyms was uncorrupt. And it also mentioned that Noah was not corrupt. So when I look at that, I look at it as, again, this is my theory, that Noah was disease-free. More than him being a perfect person. So I think obviously he had fellowship with God and they had a relationship. But I think what stands out to me is Noah and his family was disease-free. Now there's another Bible character that lived the longest in the Bible, and he lived 169 years. And he died the year of the flood. So Methuselah, I think, had a great relationship, although we don't know a lot of detail about Methuselah. There are some speculations that maybe he helped Noah build the ark, which is possible. But also he died during the flood, or not during the flood, he died before the flood, and that's important. He didn't die during the flood because I believe he was also righteous. His dad was Enoch. So when Enoch lived 365 years and then God took him, so he didn't die. But Methuselah died during the year of the flood, so he didn't have to suffer for a year, because that's about how long the flood took, was about a year. So I think maybe with Methuselah, maybe he had a disease, an infection, whatever you want to call it. If you want to call it I don't know, COVID-00, if you wanted. I don't know what it was, but I think what had happened was the whole world had some kind of a virus, and the animals got infected as well. That's why God decided to wipe out man and beast as well, because they were infected with this virus. And you see it. I read the scripture where man was corrupt and filled with violence. Well, if you look around today, it appears that the whole world is filled with violence. And more so when people are put under quarantine, or they're forced to stay home, they're forced to be locked down, violence tends to rise. You can look at the stats through the World Health Organization, and violence is on the rise. There are also some diseases that affect your mind, affect your brain as well, that can cause you to do violent things as well. So that is important to note, because I think that's what was happening here, was there was because of who knows what men were doing to animals, torturing them, all kinds of types of corruption. Jesus talks about, in the last days of Noah, so shall the Son of Man be, basically saying that when you see these types of things happening in the world, you could start looking up, because my return is close. My return is near. So he mentions Noah, the day of Noah, and Jesus was not talking about a physical flood, as in waters covering the entire earth, because we have the rainbow today that signifies a promise that God said that he will never flood the earth again with waters. So that's important. So Jesus wasn't talking about a physical flood. he was talking about the framing of the setting of Noah's day, which was corruption, which was violence. And we see that all over the world. We see governments exaggerating, lying, changing facts daily, all this kind of stuff. And that's just part of what we're growing up in, right? That seems to be the norm. That doesn't make it right, but there's violence all over the world, and there's different types of violence. There's violence against women, there's violence against the elderly, there's violence against people committing suicide, violence against themselves, there's violence against the elderly, neglect, there's all kinds of violence. And I think, again, my theory, that back in Noah's day, the corruption was people having diseases, people having infections, people having been infected by viruses, and it spread throughout the world. Very similar to what's happening now. So when I say a flood is coming, I think what's happening is, in the whole process of the governments around the world trying to get a vaccine, and I'm not gonna talk about whether I believe you should get a vaccine or not get a vaccine, but I'm talking about a worldwide phenomenon where it is possible that the entire world could be injected by a dead virus, a type of virus, a lesser of a virus than the COVID-19, in order to help us build up an immunity so that hopefully we don't get sick later. So that's the only reason why anybody would consider getting a vaccination, would be to prevent you from getting sick. So I think there's going to be a worldwide movement, a flood, where people will either not have a choice, but will have to take a vaccine, or they will have to suffer the consequences of not taking a vaccine. So that could mean something as simple as, if you go to work and everybody has the vaccination and you're not the one, and you're the only one that does not have the vaccination, that they would ask you to stay home if you're sick for 2 weeks and then come back so you don't infect anyone else. The crazy thing is if they have the vaccination and you don't have the vaccination, they should not be worried because they're protected. So I know there's arguments on both sides that could say, well, if everybody's vaccinated, then that protects you 100% from any future diseases. And we know that's not true. That's why the World Health Organization, that's why CDC recommends that you get a vaccination every single year, because influenza changes. Influenza A, B, the strains change every year, so you need to get vaccinations every single year. So I think that's what can happen as well, probably in the fall, maybe before January. Realistically, I think January is when we're going to have the vaccination for COVID-19. But the interesting thing is, when you get a vaccination, it is based on last year's data, or the last outbreak, if you will. So if you were to get influenza shots this year, 2020, say January, February, March, it's based on what happened last year between October, let's just say, and April. So all that data that they collected allowed them to study and create a new vaccination for 2020. So now we have COVID-19. All the data that they're collecting from around the world will allow them to have a vaccination for 2021. But it's going to change so that probably each year after that, they'll call it the new norm, and you're going to have to get a vaccination every single year after that. That's what I mean by a flood coming, because it's going to affect everybody. It's going to affect everyone. So that's my little Bible study for today. So feel free to comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. I used to think with the flood that it was just, people are just so violent, and it was so crazy that that God had no choice to destroy, but I couldn't figure out the animal thing. So I think what happened was, again, mankind was corrupted, both male and female, and it led into the species as well. Different creatures, different animals throughout the world, both big and small, were also corrupted in whatever way through these pre-flood viruses, if you will. So there you go. So there's my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Feel free to comment below, and I'd love to hear your opinion. Let me know if you think I'm onto something, I'm a little bit crazy, whatever you want. I just really appreciate your feedback because I think this is open for discussion. So thanks again. Really appreciate your time. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing, and I will talk to you later. Thanks.